Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Michelle Maloney. I'm the co-founder and national convener of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance and one of the creators of the Greenprints program. And it's the Greenprints Exchange Workshop series that you've joined today. We're absolutely delighted to have our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Mary Graham, joining us to talk about Indigenous philosophy and the Relationist ethos. If you've heard Mary speak before, I know that you'll be, as I am, constantly in awe of her work and her knowledge, and it looks to be a wonderful webinar. Just a quick reminder, we're recording today's session. The recording will be available on our website by early next week. But please just sit back, relax. We'll have questions at the end, and I'm going to first introduce Ayla's work and the Greenprints program so that you understand the context of today's session for the work that we're doing with Mary. So, as I said, my name's Michelle Maloney, and if you're interested in the work of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, you can find us on our website, earthlaws.org.au. And very briefly, I'm just going to give a 5-minute introduction to the work that we do. But first, I'd like to acknowledge country. And if you would like to pop in the chat whose country you're on or where you live, that would be lovely. We always like to see where people are from. The work that we do connects with people around Australia and around the world. I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on Yagara Turrbal country here in North Brisbane. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the remarkable governance system and civilizational culture that cared for country and cared for each other since time immemorial, and despite the ruptures of colonisation, continue to do amazing work. Caring for country and caring for each other. And in fact, if anyone missed the Future Dreaming webinar last night, we had a beautiful talk from Peter C. and Justine Dillon about the work of Indigenous land and sea rangers. So our sister organisation, Future Dreaming, will have that recorded webinar available next week. We'll share all the websites in the chat in a moment. But that beautiful photo there is of the water lilies at the Nudgee waterhole nearby where I live, where I walk my dogs. So before we tell you a bit about Greenprints and then introduce Mary Graham, I really do urge you all to take a big deep breath. Have a think about where you live, the things and the places, the animals, the plants, all those beautiful things around you that you love. Shake off the morning work and enjoy this beautiful session with Mary Graham. The Australian Earth Laws Alliance, we turned 10 years old this year, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about us. If you are new to us, we'd love to hear from you, shoot us a note, or become a member, or connect with our work. We're advocates for systems change so that we can shift industrialised societies away from human-centred, extractivist modes of being towards life-centred, regenerative ways of being. Our interests are across all forms of governance, and Thomas Berry, the deep ecologist, would suggest that some of the underpinning structures of industrialised societies like law, economics, the role of government, education, have been for hundreds of years, if not thousands in some places, very human-centred and have led to the mode of being today where we face a changing climate, loss of biodiversity, and a very stressed living world. Our work within Ayla looks at changing culture, connecting governance to knowledge systems like Western science and Indigenous knowledge, building community capacity, creating alternatives, and ultimately transforming law and structure. We have a range of initiatives that you can see them all on our main website, the earthlaws.org.au website. And we're also really proud to have auspiced the New Economy Network Australia, NENA, and also connecting with Future Dreaming and Regenerative Songlines Australia. So we're inspired by Earth jurisprudence, as I say, Thomas Berry's work, shifting from human-centred to Earth-centred ways of being. But we're also deeply inspired by the work of Indigenous friends and colleagues in Australia, the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. And Mary Graham and Paulina, Tyson Yunkaporta, Ross Williams, many of the other folks that we work with are deeply inspiring to the work that we do. And normally when I do an acknowledgement of country, I also like to acknowledge myself and my place in the world. I'm a descendant of the Irish convicts who were carted over here unwillingly. I'm so grateful that they were because I love this place. But I also like to acknowledge the place of my culture, my people in this ongoing legacy of how do we become Australian, how do we become a positive force on this continent and undo some of the mess that some of my own ancestors have been contributing to, but also embrace the good stuff in our culture. So Ayla's inspiration is from Western thinking and from Indigenous thinking and knowledge systems to try to find this better future for all of life on this continent and this planet. I'm not going to talk too much about the Greenprints. I know you've all signed up to listen to Mary Graham, not me, but Mary's had to jump from one event to another, so I thought I'd use it as an opportunity to tell you about this very cool initiative that we're rolling out and experimenting and working on with lots of communities, including the wonderful Anne Polina up in the Kimberley with the Martuwarra Fitzroy Council. We work with them to provide certain kinds of research. We're working with folks in the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, here in Brisbane with Regen Brisbane, connecting with folks and their work in Lithgow and the Blue Mountains. So it's a kind of process-oriented thing that helps people bring all the good things together to build from a place of relationism and to build through and into country, through law, through governance, and through all the things we have to do to transform. So in a nutshell, Greenprints is a play on the word blueprints. It's really respecting the fact that human beings are pretty clever. We have the capacity to rethink and redesign how we live in a place and how we live together. It provides a practical step-by-step approach to help folks understand all of the things that we have to do at the big picture, but making it simple to do locally with practical steps. And very importantly, I think the work we've done for 5 years doing immense research across different systems and models and methods, it can reach out into the toolkit of all the good things that we can do together. So Greenprints is a process and an output, because if we want to shift our societies, working out how to get there can be a challenge. So the Greenprints vision, this beautiful banner that I'm always showing, the idea that we can live more harmoniously, that's a very ambitious kind of word, than we are at the moment. There's so much involved in that. And our vision for Greenprints is healthy country, ensuring that our Indigenous friends and colleagues have their own self-determination and can care for their country appropriately and properly, the proper way, but also how we as non-Indigenous folks can play a part in creating healthy bioregions, healthy ecosystems, and ensuring happy, healthy humans. So the how do we get there is how Greenprints is involved. And I've only got 2 more slides and then we'll turn to Mary. In 30 years of working with community groups around Australia and around the world, there's always a lot that can be done. What we've tried to do with Greenprints is help people really think how we embed ourselves in an ecocentric way into our unique place and how we rethink and transform the economic, cultural and governance stuff that non-Indigenous people are doing and how we can do things better. If you go to our website, you'll see that we have simplified things down to some basic steps. It's not that neat and easy. It is, in fact, a very messy process. But the reason I'm proud of Greenprints and why many communities are really starting to resonate with it, including some local councils, is it helps people do the proper way, which is start with country first, not start with human visions for what a better future should look like. That comes later. We have to actually understand that we live within the biophysical realities of our beautiful continent, and we have to understand what is actually possible. How can we live here together forever? Not just move on when we eat up the world, as many of my ancestors from Europe do and have done. So I'm not going to go any further into the steps. If anyone's interested, please shoot us a note and we'd love to connect with you. But it's part of these basic steps under which there's tons of methodology and tons of ways we can work together that we've designed the Greenprints Exchange workshop series. And a really important part of the whole journey is to think differently. As evidenced by our decolonising workshop a few weeks ago with Mary Graham, Yin Paradise and myself, we had more than 350 people register for that. That's a lot for us. We normally have about 150, 200 people, and it shows that people are keen to think differently. They're keen to undo some of the stuff we've learned as Westerners and to think really carefully about what it means to be a human being as part of this interconnected web of life. And that relationist ethos, all of the things that I've personally learned from people like Mary Graham about the beautiful understanding of our interconnectedness, that's the very starting point that we're proud of in Greenprints, so that people can start to unpack what they think they know and really get to know, I thought I'd go to another slide, really get to know our place in the world and how we can be a force for good. So if anyone's interested in any of that, greenprints@earthlaws.org.au. Otherwise, do have a look at our websites and it will tell you heaps about all of the good things that other communities are doing. We're just helping in the background to structure some of their work and research. Now, I'm hoping after my little intro that Mary has had time to get her cup of tea and join us. If not, I'm sure she's not far away. Are you with us, Mary? Not yet. What I might actually do, I'll use this opportunity, if people have come to this webinar with particular questions, things perhaps you've heard Mary talk before, perhaps you're really keen. Sorry, Mary's actually just texting me. Please pop your questions in there, and what I'll do is I'll actually read them out at the beginning when Mary starts to give her talk. My apologies, she's a very, very busy lady. She's actually just coming now. So if you'd like to just take a moment, let's all use this rare opportunity to actually take a deep breath and have a think about country. And I'm going to put myself on mute and give Mary a ring and make sure she's got the link. She's super keen to join us. She's just a very busy lady. But yeah, if you've got questions for Mary or just ponderings, please pop them in the chat. That'll help inform our discussion. Won't be a tick. Hi again, everyone. Mary is here and she's keen to join us. She's just having a little bit of technical trouble. So yeah, please feel free to make yourself a glass of water or a cup of tea. We won't be much longer. Thank you so much. And thank you, Maria, for your lovely smile. It's nice to feel reassured. People aren't getting cranky. Good on you. Won't be a tick.
You can see me. Oh, okay. See you then.
Thank you so much for your patience, everyone. We had terrible trouble getting the link through to Mary. Thank you so much,
I don't know
Mary.
why. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry about this. Oh.
it's not your fault, darling. It's the technology. I don't understand. It's not
Yes.
your fault.
Yes.
All right, now, Mary, I'm just going to try to find you and pin you.
Yes.
Welcome, welcome. I've given an acknowledgement of country and I've welcomed everybody. Thank you for the love heart, Aurora. We really do appreciate your patience.
Oh, lovely.
Mary, I'm just trying to find you. Hang on.
I am here.
Yeah, I can hear you, my love. There we go. There you are. Hooray. Thank you, everyone. We've got 80 lovely people. We had 250 registered who'll be watching the video, I'm sure, later. So,
oh, lovely.
Mary, do you have a cup of tea? I hope that wasn't too stressful.
Huh? Yes, now I've got a cup of tea. I'm ready.
Lovely. Well, Mary, I've introduced the Australian Earth Laws Alliance and how inspired we are by both Western thinking in earth-centeredness, like Thomas Berry, but also your work around the relationist ethos. So when you're ready, what we'll do, you've still got easily 40 minutes. We've got heaps of time, and we'll still have after that time for questions and discussion. So
wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
So Mary, I'll jump off. I'll get out of the way in a minute. And then, so for everyone, we might let Mary talk for however she likes, 30 or 40 minutes. And please put your questions in the chat as we go and I'll collate them. I give to you, after much technical wailing and gnashing of teeth, the very wonderful Mary Graham. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks very much for that. If I could introduce myself in an Aboriginal way. So my name is Mary Graham. I was born in Brisbane, but I grew up in my father's people's area down here on the Gold Coast, Yugambeh language speaking people. And my own mob is the Kombu-merri here, right on the Gold Coast strip. My mother's mob are the Wakka Wakka from around the Burnett River district. She was on the, what do you call it? Under the Queensland legislation of the Act, Protection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Act. So that meant her movements were curtailed. Her status was determined by the state. My father wasn't under the Act, so he brought her back down here to Southport. So I've got lots of relatives all around on both sides, actually. So I usually start off in a very conventional way. I start off with that I agree with the idea of out of Africa, the story. I know there's other people, schools of thought about that. But ancient archaic human beings seem to have started there, developing over, literally millions of years. And at some point or other, those early human beings decided to move out of that continent, going north around the other side of the world, basically. And this is over a long period of time. So then heading south through to the Americas, right to the very bottom of the Americas, and another area, our group came via what became Asia, that area. And this is at a time when a lot of continents were still joined up. So the idea was that apparently that it could have been that, as anthropologists say, we could have walked into the country. So the people who became Aboriginal in this continent probably walked into the country, not by canoes and so on, because the edges, the coastline was still very different way back then. So when people and are going by straight research that has already been done over a long period of time, people entered into and went around the coastline, following the coastline right around, gradually populating the centre at the same time too. So, and meeting up apparently around about the Adelaide, around about the South Australian region. So, and gradually just simply staying in those areas. Other research says that, and not all that old either, that Adelaide was the Museum of Adelaide was the go-to place, the very old go-to place for all kinds of research, science, studying the country, studying the native peoples, so on and so on. So it's been there, I don't know for how long, but so they've got remains, they've had remains there. They've had other things there, like, again, this is later research, hair strands of people, ancient hair strands of Aboriginal people that were brought there a very long time ago, which was already old then, and then they promptly forgot it. They lost it in the museum, and then not all that long ago they found it. It was found again. So they decided, the Ethos decided to do up-to-date dating tests on it, and found that it was around about 60 to 70,000 years old, something like this, 50 to 60,000 years old. Pardon me. And then they decided at the same time that they may as well try to do this further research to compare it to Aboriginal people who live in the Adelaide area, or South Australian near Adelaide area. And to their surprise, found that they were the same people. So they looked at the DNA of people and they found that they were the same people. Now, by inference, by this time, of course, that people are everywhere and have been for tens of thousands of years. By inference, all of these other places are populated with people who've been there for tens of thousands of years. So in other words, the idea, very idea, which is still very popular today, that Aboriginal people were essentially primitive hunter-gatherers wandering or roaming about the country, constantly on the search for food, resources, occasionally fighting, and never living a settled life. That's the norm. So they're ultra primitive and so on and so on. And this research gives the total lie to that, because if anybody could be said to be settled, it's Aboriginal people living in the same region basically for all this time. Occasionally they might have had to go through somebody else's place, but of course, because they're so old, and almost a way of life is to have protocols all the time of how you get on. So they've been there in this long period of time. So when you ask Aboriginal people, anywhere you go, how did you get here? Who are you? And all this sort of stuff, anything you want to ask, they generally always say, we didn't come from anywhere else. This is the country in which we became human. Or in their own words, they'll say something like, this is the country, or this land grew us up. It grew us up, and they mean it in a deliberate way like that, as in this land literally created us, made us. So we didn't come from anywhere else. And you have to add to that this other research approach, I suppose, about what makes human beings, how do people realize that they are even human? And again, according to the science and the anthropologies, it's when people start to make a note of about what death means to them. So the idea of burial sites, of art or representation on walls, in cave walls, on stone walls of some sort. They leave a mark of some sort, but they're proper representation, not just scratchings, not just because those sorts of marks have been there for 120,000 years here in Australia. They have found those sort of markings, but they're just markings. They're not proper representation. Representation means human figures, spirit figures who might look like anything, flora, fauna, and things like that, actual representations of other life forms and so on. So when that happens, that's what tells anthropologists that people, the people who are done this, have realized, have a reflective reasoning about what death is, there is such a thing as a life after death, and so on. So when that happens, that puts a whole other meaning to what human life actually is. And that starts around about according to that other research I mentioned before, 60 to 70,000 years, or 50 to 60,000 years, anywhere between 50 and 70, I suppose. And you can look this up in the newspapers like the Guardian Weekly. You don't have to go into the research itself if you like. Just look for these articles about oldest people in the country or whatever, you know. So people have come into the country, settled on various places, but to go back to tell another story, actually, might emphasize this. A marvelous story from the Central Desert area. It's a public story, so it's allowed, and I have permission for it. So it starts off with how people came into being there. So how they say it, how this story goes, is that the Earth is like a lunarscape. So it's flat with no features, no trees, no rivers, no mountains or hills or anything like that, just flat. But there's a life dormant underneath the Earth, way down underneath. Something, it's never clear in the story what triggers it, but something triggers this life forms to start to move, to come to life, to awake, I should say. They emerge above the surface of the Earth, and what they are all sorts of flora and fauna and all kinds of things, and they're larger than life. Really large. So a kangaroo is large as a 2-story building. A snake is as big as a train. They start to move about, engaging with one another in very human-like ways. They start fighting, wrestling about, throwing things at one another, making love occasionally too. So they engage in all of this and making a big ruckus. And this whole ruckus, and by the way, its example is one figure throwing a heap of stones or pebbles at another, trying to kill or fighting or whatever. And where they land, that's where a whole pile of like boulders or rocks or whatever, that's there nowadays. So the story is always tuned into the actual living landscape right now. So they explain that landscape like that. This is where these dreaming ancestors, this is what happened here, this is what happened over there, and so on and so on. So, but in the dreaming period, it awakens these other life forms, and what they are proto-humans. They're proto-humans. They're like still in a fetal stage. So they make their way to the surface with difficulty, and they emerge from the surface, and the life forms before, who are already there, help them to become, they finish the job of helping them to become fully human beings. And it's a lovely description of how they do that. They stand them upright, straighten their back, help them to exercise their limbs, their legs, their arms, clear their fingers, and their fingers clear their nose and mouth, so help them to breathe. They slap them on the back to help them to breathe. So the fetus becomes a, tiny person, and march them up and down. They march them up and down, exercising them. And so they become fully formed human beings. So all the original ancestors, flora, fauna, insects, everything you can name, helps humans become fully formed human beings. And what you're hearing, of course, is a genesis. So a genesis just from one place. That's all. That's not the genesis for the whole country, but you can imagine how variations on a theme right across the country are the same thing, that the land has invented us. That's the actual creator. There's no spirit figure. There's no intermediary figures, spirit figures. There are ancestors. There are other life forms ancestors. They're our ancestors too, not just our human ancestors, not just the immediate ones, but the ancient ones and so on. So you enter a world where you're not on your own. It's already crowded. It's crowded with other life forms and ancestors and so on and so on. And they help you to grow into fully formed human beings. So those ancestors are just ancestors. They are not turned into, in the imagination of these new human beings, as a god or gods. There are no, in the ancient system, the old system. It's not a belief system at all, doesn't rely on faith. Faith has nothing to do with the dreaming. Actually, you rarely ever hear, I believe in the dreaming. You know, it just is, you don't need faith to know the, you know, sun is going to rise in the morning and the sets in the evening. It doesn't take faith. So the dreaming is actually how you see reality, actually, the real existence around you. And of course, the best advice or thing that helps you to do that is the very thing that is a living thing that you're walking on, of course. But don't get the idea that it's an idea of worshipping or looking at it, because it's the creator. You don't necessarily worship it or look up to it. You're not worshipping nature worshipers or anything like that. In fact, it's a good idea not to worship anything. The whole idea is that it has looked after us. It has invented us. It's created us. It continues to look after us. So it's looked after us with resources. You know, it's continues to look after us by keeping us going, basically. And of course, it looks after us in the most meaningful way of giving us meaning in life, actually. So we grasp meaning about life from the earth, because we've been invented by it. But again, it's not to do with it's a god or anything like that. So there's no notion in the old system before whitefellas come, the old system, and there are variations on a theme, as I said, all over the whole country, but there's no notion of a god or a godhead figure. No heaven, no hell, nothing like that. It's not in the mindset, not in the mindset. What's in the mindset is the idea of the law of obligation. So the land looks after us. We soon get the idea, after a long period of time, we learn that we're supposed to look after it, you know. So it's a reciprocal, a great reciprocal long system of long standing. A friend of mine put it like this: it seems as if it's a very long-term experiment in human order making. That's what Aboriginal people did. Had very long time to create this system. And when you're looking at that language map, what you're looking at is not just languages. You're looking at a political and social ordering system. That's what it actually is. So every one of these hundreds and hundreds of clan groups across the country, there's no such thing as empty land or nobody's land. Every square inch of the country is somebody's land, you know. So all of them are autonomous. There's no chief one or central dominating clan group or dominating group of clan groups, you know, dominating everybody else or something like that. So no notion of a state with a small s. This is a system that came into being before the rise of states. Before the rise of states. And the rise of states happened with large-scale agriculture. You know, it comes in like about 12 to 13,000 years ago when large-scale agriculture happens elsewhere in the world. It never happens here. Never happens here because the factors for it are not present or were never present. So, for example, what do they call it now? Large river systems, mother rivers, they call them, big systems, maybe has delta systems. Like the example I always give is of the Great Nile, an ancient system. Every time it flooded, still floods, it brings down silt, and silt, if you have silt, which doesn't happen here in such large scale, that is, when you have that, then you can have large-scale agriculture. This old country never had large-scale agriculture. It has agriculture, but very small scale, very small scale. So when you have large-scale agriculture, that's when that's coincides. It was not just a coincidence. It gives rise to states because people start to realise they can have the best land. Unfortunately, if other people don't have the best good land, very good land, they are soon taken over by the people with very good land, just in the form of simply dominating all around their own environment. But it doesn't stay there, of course. After a while, states themselves start competing with each other for the best land, for various other things they're competing for. So warring starts, and all of that comes in the large-scale agriculture, states, and competitive ethos, and warring between, and so on. And it never stops, of course. It goes on right to today. It just simply doesn't stop. And so we end up with a system with where the hegemonic rulers, a ruler or rulers, are competing with each other as to who controls all the resources in the world. And you can just think about that and read, listen to the news, because that's what's going on at the moment, actually. But anyway, going back to starting out on this road, what Aboriginal people did was to have all these interdependent or autonomous groupings across, language groupings across the place. But as I said, it's not just a language grouping, it's a political and social ordering system. That's what it is. You could also call it a system of a sacralized, ecological, collaborative stewardship system. So this idea of looking after, of a custodial ethic, comes from land. So land is looked after us. We're obliged to look after it. The reciprocal system grows bigger and broader and stronger and so on, right across the country. So you end up with a law of obligation, a custodial ethic, a law of obligation where you look after rather than dominate and compete and domination are not in it. So you're looking after reciprocity and so on. On top of that, the reciprocity says that, and this system says that you look after resources also. You look after resources. And in looking after resources, people then have security. People have stability, which comes first, and then security. If you have stability, you have security, not the other way around. It's not like that at all. So the political and social system is like this, not hierarchical. In other words, not a state. It's a flat system where every one of these groups are autonomous. They're all autonomous. Women are autonomous, definitely, but the land itself is autonomous. It's a self-regulating system, autonomous self-regulating system, and that becomes a kind of blueprint for the kind of social and ordering system that you have. So reciprocity, law of obligation comes into it, and how you get on with each other. Multiple areas across the whole country, and what emerges out of this system, political and social system, is the idea of relationalism. So a theme of relationalism and survivalism comes into being, because in the beginning, really from the beginning, it is about security. But to understand the full nature of what security is, you have to go deeper into it. Security isn't just about arming yourself. So there are all kinds of ways of gaining security. And how Aboriginal people worked it out is with this law of obligation, relationalism, and caring for something outside of the self. Something outside of the self. That's relationalism. That's relationalist ethos. Relationalism and survivalism are entangled with each other. They're the same. We are made of this. We are both relationalists and survivalists. Relationalism, family, community, friends, and enemies actually too. That's all relationalism. Survivalism is straightforward survivalism. It could be small scale, like you've got to be careful crossing the road, you don't get hit by a bus. You've got to be careful what you eat nowadays. You might have gone into a dodgy restaurant, or it might be 1,000 or a few thousand years ago. You've got to be careful about what you're eating. These berries here They're similar to those berries over there, but one of them is poisonous and the other one isn't. So you've got to be careful about things like that. You learn, that is all learned over thousands of years, of course. Small scale, so large scale are conflicts essentially, or natural occurrences like, earthquakes or volcanoes going off, rivers changing their course, the sea receding or reclaiming, and so on and so on. Large scale in the natural way, but human invented large scale. So wars, battle, conflict of all sorts, a small scale conflict or large scale conflicts, modern or ancient. That will go on. So we are bound up in both of these things, but they're all mixed up with each other, you know, relationalism and colonialism. But a colonialist ethos is something else. Colonialist ethos says that having suffered these kind of various crises, a person, an individual or a group or a family or a tribe, a clan group or a state for that matter, comes to the conclusion that the earth is a very dangerous place, that the whole of life is a fight for survival of the fittest, and so on. So you have to protect yourself. You end up with a thinking like you are a law unto yourself. You're a conscious isolate. You're a discrete entity, and you have to always be aware of who is around and what is around the natural world and the social world, the political world, and so on. All of it can be hostile, so you have to look after yourself. So these other sayings come into being over time. You know, the whole of life is like a dog-eat-dog world. Everything is out to get you, so you get them before they get you. All those sorts of words that emphasizes that you're alone in the world and you have to fight like mad for safety and so on. And some people and some countries are like that actually. So, but a relationalist ethos says that you care about something for yourself outside of the self, and of course that's the land itself and so on. So what Aboriginal people do with this law of obligation is they use the relationalist ethos to counter survivalist ethos tendencies. They use that. So it's not to deny, it's not an either or, it's not it's not an excluded middle kind of thing, either relationalist or survivalist. They're joined together, but you use the relationalism to counter the survivalist before, you know, panicking and start damaging your environment and so on and so on, taking advantage of, exploiting, and so on and so on. So custodial ethic, you know, law of obligation, look up, you have to train in a sense. Looking after land is like the training period for having a blueprint for the kind of society that you have. Okay, so you have that kind of idea. So relationalism is made up of four, basically different attributes, like four of them. There can be others if you like, but to me it seems like the very important part is we are autonomous. We are all autonomous beings, and as I said, that out there, the nature, of course we are nature too. That's autonomous also, and autonomy doesn't mean that you're an autonomous individual who you know you're a law unto yourself. Not that kind of autonomy. The autonomy is autonomous regard towards other people. So you recognize the autonomy of other people. You recognize it. You may not like people. Doesn't matter whether you like people or not, other people or a person. You recognize, first of all, that they're autonomous beings, that they have not just a life, but they have their own selfhood, which cannot be enslaved or owned or ordered about by anybody else. Nothing like that. So autonomy, along with autonomous regard, look at it like diplomacy multiplied by 10. That's what it's actually about, even though it allows for the presence of conflict though too, you know. Balance is the other attribute. Balance in all things. Gender balance, of course, men's law and women's law, men's business, women's business. That's a gender balance system, that is. So gender balance says that men and women in balance equally, although I don't like the word equal, it sounds very much like something forced. Balance occurs in nature, so it has to be like that also in that sense. So both run society. Both of them are responsible for society together on the same level, actually. There's also governance balance. Besides gender balance in governance, there's governance balance, as in some of the two or more. There's a couple of problematics that all human groups had to work out. Two of them are authority and power, what to do with these two things. Most ancient systems, most ancient civilizations, they conflated the two, power and authority. What Aboriginal people did was something quite unique. They separated those two things, and they said that authority is in the hands of knowledgeable people, which most older people constitute those knowledgeable people, but it can include very smart young people too. Very smart, very skillful, good self-managers. The most important thing for young people is to be good self-managers, and then they become knowledgeable people too. So that's the authority, but it doesn't rule. An authority which does not rule, and that's an amazing thing when you think about it. And power is in the hands of all the other people, all the rest of the society. There's an old modern protest saying about power to the people, power for the people, and so on. Well, just imagine this is an ancient system which actually put that into a governance system. In other words, the people can't be ordered about under pain of life and death by the authority people. They can't act like royalty. They can't act like pharaohs, emperors, monarchies, dictators. They can't be like state, they can't be like hierarchies. They can't be like that, a hierarchy, or a theocracy, which is also a hierarchy, or a military kind of hierarchy. It can't be anything like that. It's a flat system. And that's why the people can disagree if they want with the authority people. The authority people can't have power and life and death over people, nothing like that. So it's a flat system. Balance in all those sorts of ideas in wherever it is. I work also for another organisation, Black Card, and it helps with cultural capability training. And its slogan is working with, not working for. So you don't work for anyone, you work with people. So wherever is possible for having a, tap down the hierarchy, that's a good thing. Place is the other thing. There's an old saying by an old queen, yes, so no Queen's Jubilee. That's right. So no Queen, of course. An old French philosopher, Descartes, everybody might be familiar with. I think, therefore I am, he said, something like that. If there was an Aboriginal equivalent, there isn't, but if there was, it would be, I am located, therefore I am. So place is extremely important. Place has created you. That's the place that via mother and father, two different places, of course, they've invented you. They've thrown you up, basically. So that's place. And that's place in a locality. There is also a place in time. An event in time is also a place in time. But then we're getting more into the idea of the dreaming and what it means. And I don't really go into that because it's really complex. If you've dabbled in science a bit, that might help. But it is to do with multidimensional time and ancestors, the importance and presence of ancestors in the dreaming. So I usually leave that aside, just to say that place is the most important thing. And the other one, the fourth one, is ethics. Now, oddly enough, there's no ethics in the Aboriginal system, but what there is the law, the idea of the law, L-A-W, L-O-R-E, and that is the real word for the proper word terms for ethics. So a moral life. And that takes into account, of course, the idea of how you're living, actually. So the idea, you might have heard the books written about it, the land is the source of the law. The land is the source of the law. So how you behave is essentially taught, or you learn it through this caring for land. And then that's, as I said, that's like the training system to learn about what ethics actually are, what it is, what it can be, actually. So the other thing that's very helpful is to have a particular logic. The logic, you have to look at the map again. It goes something like this. Sorry, I should start out the other way. It's not to say it's not Aristotelian logic, Aboriginal logic. Aristotelian logic, three main rules, or laws. The law of the excluded middle. Any sentence that begins with something like, either you're a friend of the Americans or you're an enemy. You can't sit on the fence, not anymore. You might have had different countries that are non-aligned. There are still countries nowadays that want to insist on being non-aligned. But in the logic of global politics, no, you can't have that anymore. You've got to be either on the side of the global hegemon, America, or not. The other one is, so anything beginning with either or, is like that. That's a Aristotelian rule, law. The other logic is anything that begins with, for example, all Aboriginal people are drunk and violent. I know a particular family. They may or may not be, drunk or violent or whatever. However, there's a conclusion to that. So you come up with a first premise, all something are. Like, for example, sometimes I use an example, silly example, like all redheads are mad. I know Miss Jones, she's got red hair. Miss Jones must be mad. So first premise, second premise holds that up. The conclusion confirms all those premises, and that's what that's the law of non-contradiction. I think or identity. Another one that is the third one is any sentence that begins with if something or other, something or other, something or other, therefore or then something or other, something or other. If then, any if then argument is Aristotelian also. I've looked at Chinese logic for a while. I don't know if it's all of Asian logic, but there are things written about Chinese logic, and it's been called the paradoxical logic. So everybody knows that's a symbol of yin and yang. It's a curved line, and that tells you that it's flexible there's a flexibility between two or more positions. Where unlike the Aristotelian, which is a sharp line, either or, dualism basically. So the sharp line is flexible, a bit of black and the white and vice versa. It says that they accept into their considerations of a matter, argument or debate or whatever, they accept contradictions, paradoxes, ambiguity, ambivalence. They accept that. Whereas the Western system says, no, they want certainty. All of that other stuff is too much uncertainty. We want certainty above all, and probably practically every other culture in the world knows that you can never have certainty in life, not ever. But in Western society, you keep there is this constant pursuit of the truth, whatever the truth is. Now, it's not to say that logic is wrong or anything or bad, or it has been called patriarchal and, you know, wrong in that way and so on. But just imagine if you like cop shows like I do, especially forensic examinations and all that kind of stuff. The forensic scientist or the detective, they have to determine this body on the floor with a knife in its back. Is this body John Smith or not? In other words, the identity has to be absolutely spot on. Either it's John Smith or it isn't John Smith. So that's exactly where that excluded middle logic works. That's where it's meant to be. So it all depends on how you use, where and how you use a logic, basically, you know. Aboriginal logic, you have to look at this old map again, this map, which is a whitefellas map, as you probably already know. Gee, I forget his name at the moment. Tyndale, I think, Tyndale. So look at the map again and look at it in this way, that there are hundreds of places, hundreds. We're not even actually quite sure. I keep hearing different numbers. I always used to say 500, but it might be more. It's being studied at the moment because some groups say, well, our lot is not in there, you know, and so on. So it's being revised as we speak. So hundreds of places. Every place has a dreaming story, and quite often several dreaming stories that overlap with us, but every place has got its own dreaming stories. And a dreaming story is like a creative narrative, or it's like a genesis. A genesis is, you know, just imagine a big continent like this, huge, and there's hundreds of genesis. Not a genesis for the whole country. There's no such thing. So a genesis for a place is, for these hundreds of places, is a law for that place. So hundreds of laws, hundreds of them all over, not one law for the whole country. The one law you could talk about, you could maintain, is the idea of land inventing us. That's probably the one thing, but it's reality, you know, so it's that kind of law, you know. A law for a place is the truth of the whole of existence, about the background, the history of the people, the flora and fauna of that region, and so on and so on. So the truth for that place. There's no absolute truth, which is why our own old system, dreaming, is not a religion, because absolutism, I'm sorry if this offends people, but absolutism in thinking, there is no absolutism in Aboriginal logic and thinking. Absolutism is very religious, is religion writ large, and it's also ideology actually too. So, and a truth is simply the perspective of the whole of existence from a particular locality in land. So perspective. And as you can see, there's hundreds and hundreds of perspectives. So the equation comes out, or the logic comes out, as all perspectives are valid and reasonable. And remember, it's just valid and reasonable. It doesn't make it right. You know, we're not into the moral right and wrong stuff. We're just looking at valid and reasonable. So this particular view is valid and reasonable for those people in that southeast of West Australia area. It's not the same as this mob in the northern part of Queensland, you know, and so on and so on. So it's you have to be careful about this. All perspectives are valid and reasonable, because if you take it to the nth degree, which is dangerous, you could end up with extreme relativism, or, in the words of Hannah Arendt, you could end up with nihilistic relativism, you know, and that pathway leads to fascism, of course. It leads to uncivilization, basically. So the last thing I want to talk about a little bit about technology. A favorite complaint, or sometimes straight out racist insult, for Aboriginal people is to say that Aboriginal people, they were so backward, so primitive, they didn't even discover the wheel. You know, they couldn't You know, they're lacking in brain power to discover wheels or invent wheels and so on. People who say those sort of things or think those things, they have to do a lot more study of the country that they're living in. So it starts off with poor old Australia, the driest continent on earth, you know, dry as anything. So no river systems, no, sorry, there are river systems, but no delta systems, no great mother systems. There is a mother system, the Great Murray-Darling. It's unbelievable, you know, it's 1,500 kilometres long. In fact, I just found the other day, with all of its tributaries and all the other, you know, other things about it, the actual length of it is about 3,500 or 4,000 kilometres long. Unbelievable. It's like a mother system, but there's no delta system near the coast, because when it floods, it brings down silt, old systems like the Nile, you know, the Yellow River, or no, the Yellow River, I think, you know, in China, and other old continents. So when you have that, you can afford, that society that lives there, they can afford to have large scale agriculture. This poor old country couldn't have large scale agriculture. They had small scale and then in the places that it could have small scale agriculture. You just have to read books by Bill Gammage, The Greatest Estate on Earth, or Bruce Pascoe, Dark Emu. They tell you in actual detail amazing things that I didn't know, a lot of people didn't know, of how Aboriginal people actually technically ran the country. So we did pretty well, even without delta systems and so on. So no delta system here, no large scale agriculture, only small scale. When you have large scale agriculture, what do you need? You need vehicles with wheels. That's where wheels might come in handy then. So you have to have that to go and collect produce, big lots of produce, bring it all to a central place where it's sorted, counted and recorded. So then, of course, you end up with writing. So no big agriculture, no large scale kind of systems like this, no writing. And as we all know, writing started in those ancient places like the Middle East, which has been bombed into almost like into complete shambles now by the West, and China and India. Those places, they invented writing, you know. So what happens also is that the system, the governance systems changes. Before it might have been loose systems, governing systems. After big agriculture comes in, they become rigid hierarchies, because that's, along with big agriculture, the rise of states starts. States with a small s, the rise of states. Our old system has been around already in the time frame, already for a couple of tens of thousands of years before the rise of states. We've already worked something out without agriculture, big agriculture. So they become, enter into competitive warring, competitive governance systems, competitive states. They start warring. And the most amazing thing, terrible thing, is that it goes on right to today. It starts about 10, 12, 13,000 years ago, that kind of agriculture. They start warring with each other especially over which winner controls all the resources in their area. Now, 10,000, 12,000 years later, they're still arguing and fighting and warring about that, because this is what is going on at the moment. I don't know if people realize that, but all these wars that are going on at the moment is who is going to be the ruling hegemon that controls all the resources in the world. That's what it's about, actually. And wouldn't it make you, it just amazes you to realize that they haven't worked out a better system yet. And all this time, tens of thousands of years. So the other key factor that is not there for large agriculture is no domesticatable animals, no native horses, no native cattle, no elephants, no camels, no transhumance animals, you know, like herding. You know, the great Sami people in the north, they herd thousands of deer. So no deer in this country, no sheep, no goats, no pigs, no llamas, because apparently in South America, I think the llamas were, I think those fellas there, native peoples, you know, they looked after them too, had them. So nothing, so they couldn't, even if they'd had the right kind of landscape, they couldn't have had it, because otherwise they would have been forced to, in the absence of domesticatable animals, they would have had to basically treat their own people like slaves, of beasts of burden, you know, enslaved. And of course, the Aboriginal idea about everybody being a autonomous being, you just simply couldn't have that. Couldn't have systems like that. Anyway, I might leave it there. It's more complex than all of that. Anyway, but
yeah, no, Mary, thank you so much. I think everyone's been listening so intently. There aren't a lot of questions in there, but some very cheerful comments. And we've actually just got one question. Nina has asked, Mary, could you please say more about ancient Australia as a self-regulating system? I'm not sure if she means human governance self-regulating system or nature, but probably human governance. Yes, thanks, Nina.
Yes, well, when they've worked out the idea of a relationalism, and especially this idea of what security is and what stability is, because it's like the words authority and power. Everybody assumed for a long time, writers and thinkers, that they go together like a horse and carriage, you know, authority and power. And not so. When you really look at the nature of those two things, they're not. There's no rule that says they should be joined together. Well, it's the same thing with stability and security. They don't go together like a horse and carriage either. You have to look at them separately, what they actually mean, and looking after managing the resources so that nobody is left out or left behind, or the system is to the advantage of only one or two groups, but not with these others. We'll forget about their advantage, their well-being. So you can't do that, because that will lead to instability. Stability relies on looking at other people. Now, not necessarily in this kind-hearted, we'll all join hands and sing Kumbaya. It's not like that at all. It's not a pursuit of virtue. It's not a moral philosophy. It really is the idea of that stability comes with having a system which is rational, which is efficient for everybody, that doesn't leave anybody behind, and it's grounded. It truly is grounded in a realistic way. So then everybody feels it's stable, because they're not about to be attacked by some other tribe that's going to take over their land just because they have good water or plenty of hunting or whatever, or in the right place and so on, and the other lot don't have it, and so they want to take over, you know. So if you have that stability, then you've got security, and that's how it comes first. They're equal, but they come together. So the most important part is the stable system of looking after everyone, and then everybody feels secure. Nobody feels secure. You know, I could understand what has got a lot to do with this is actually fate itself, F-A-T-E, fate, not fatalistic, as I was not meaning that, but fate. So all these other places, continents, they were all, because they're joined up, which is good in one way, but which turned out to be quite dangerous in another way. So there might have been some kind of a terrible thing going on. Could have been natural, you know, like I said before, earthquakes and so on, or it could have been a famine, a drought or famine or something like that. That caused that tribe of people, could have been big tribe or small tribes, but it could have been, you know, thousands of people having to relocate themselves somewhere else. When they do that, they dislocate other people, and those people have to move on and so on. And it's in a natural kind of way, wars start just by that alone. old Australia didn't have to have systems like it's an island continent. It really is a system of, you know, what movies and cartoons have been made about, Gilligan's Island or something. It's an island where you're marooned and you have to learn, your little group has to learn how to get on with each other. That's what happened to Aboriginal people. So they had good relationships with the Northern Asian people, coming and going, occasionally fighting with each other. So a different view of conflict also comes into it. So there's conflict, which is natural, a natural thing, see it as a natural thing, but extreme conflict, like invasions, that's what I call invasions, don't happen because they've already got this other system going, you know.
And Mary, we've got a couple more questions, which is,
I don't know, is that okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's answered it. The self-regulation comes from the autonomy and that movement. And I was just going to ask, the interconnectedness of that idea of relationism is, if one group had a problem, they wouldn't just be invaded and eaten out by someone else. They knew that they could go next door or go and seek help. Because I know you and others have talked about how people would look after other clans and other groups, you know, and support each other. And to me, that's the essence of relationism, is this idea that if something goes wrong, there's other people and other will support you. They're not going to try to take advantage of your situation.
But it also does work in all kinds of things. Like I said, it's not like singing Kumbaya and we'll all join hands and be friends. Even if you are arguing, if you don't get on with somebody else, and there's no rule, remember, there's no rule that says you must get on with other people. Where's that rule? Maybe you just don't like each other and you don't get on, you don't like how they are or something. So they become almost like traditional enemies. So traditional enemies are like relationalism too. You know each other so well. And just think of France and England. They've always hated each other and jealous of each other and had wars, you know. Now that, I know it sounds very strange, but that's a relationship. That's a relationalist thing. So,
and one thing, Mary, that we didn't have time to talk about, but perhaps we can explore in another session, is you mentioned to me, you know, things like the mother-in-law rule. Aboriginal society had strong rules, had strong protocols, not just to handle conflict, but to avoid conflict.
Yeah, to avoid it. Yeah, have other ways of handling things.
Who couldn't talk to each other based on experience.
That sort of thing. Well,
Mary, sorry, there's another question here about a topic I know you love. Sue has asked or said, I'm very interested in citizen-led participatory and deliberative democracy processes, and that would be like citizens' assemblies. And I'm wondering how that fits within the relationist ethos. Mary?
Oh, no, look, all I can say is I agree too. From this Aboriginal system, that's exactly right. And some people might want to say, well, how can you have that? Aboriginal systems were small systems, you know, they were small societies. And don't forget the Greek system, the ancient Greek system, they were small societies too, actually, not big mass societies. But yes, that's a good question. How could that work in a big mass society now, you know? So I am really interested, and I try to follow where these things have been taking place, where citizens' assemblies are gathering together, because let's face it, a whole lot of people, I'd say millions of people, are getting fed up with the failure of democracy. You know what I mean? And I do remember, if you all remember, whether or not they were going to have a war in Iraq, you know, invade Iraq, millions and millions of people all over the world took to the streets to protest about that. And governments, you know, just ignored them. And I thought at the time, and I think probably thousands of other people thought, well, so much for democracy. So much for democracy, so much for government listening to the people, how the people talking, you know. Yeah. So you need another system. So there are thousands, literally, if not millions of people are wondering, how can we have a better system where people are listened to? But I always think of the beauty about that citizens' assemblies is that within the mass society, what is to stop some kind of system like smaller, what do you call it, cohorts, I suppose, something like a cohort, like suburbs, various suburbs. Well, they are like cohorts if you have several people. So the theory is that you have these cohorts, these assemblies, And you might have experts there. Well, you've got to have experts there, but don't let them run anything. They are giving advice, and don't have a hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? Don't have a rigid hierarchy. Have a hierarchy, and definitely have older people as an authority there, because the great value of older people, and I and a few other people, Aboriginal people, have had to say to some younger Aboriginal people, look, the great value of older people is that they are there to remind you of what is valuable in life, what's important in life. All older people have that great, that great thing about them. That's why they have to be in forums, they have to be in any kind of setup where you're making decisions about, life affirming, invaluable things. Don't, they're not ready for the knacker's yard or anything like that. You've got to have them there.
Thank you, Mary.
And women and men running things. It's got to come into being,
Here. There's a great question here, Mary, that actually kind of links to the book that you and I are working on together. So the question is, do you have any suggestions about how to support the re-establishment of relationism or the relationist ethic now in our modern survivalist mentalities? Do you sense it could be possible to evolve toward relationism? And before you answer, Mary, I want to give a plug for the fact that Mary and I have been plugging away for more than a year when we have moments of time on a book that is basically looking at how the relationist ethos works. And the second part of it is what would Australian society look like if we considered all these aspects of Aboriginal philosophy in day-to-day work. And we've just finished a chapter on some of the ideas around what cities could look like if we put the living world in relationship with us better and each other. But anyway, Mary, your suggestions, I know there's a lot of them, but your suggestions on how to bring relationism into our world.
Well, there's a great long list. People will have to buy the book when they come out.
They will have to buy the book. That's why I bought the book, Mary.
What I was going to say was, I've already more or less talked about a lot of that, about that particular thing of citizens' assemblies, of having men and women. Like, for example, one of the issues in the cities, but it could be any town, regional centre or whatever, instead of having, you have dual mayors, male and female mayors, and the councils have to be male and female, not exactly equal. Don't worry about becoming, what do you call it, fundamentalist about these things. Wrong, it's a wrong approach. Don't be fundamentalist. Just a rough balance between men and women, and so on. The other big thing is having philosophy in schools. These are things that could be put in place now. Philosophy in schools. Now, a Murray school, I think that it would include ideas about rites of passage, Aboriginal rites of passage, the system of what that means actually. So how young people can learn or should learn about the environment in detail. Say they're in a particular suburb. Well, from every age group, with a curriculum suitable, of course, to the age group, learn about what that environment in which that school is placed, what is it about? So they learn absolutely everything about the soil, about the insects, about the birds that are there. So it is embedded in them. It's actually embedded, and not just learning for its own sake. But learning for its own sake is good too, but learning how to look after it. So the rule of obligation, obligatory teaching of obligations. It's an ancient system, and it's not purely Aboriginal either. That's been in many other old cultures, what our obligations are, but especially in the education system, and that's a long-term view. But of course, changing a system of this. Somebody said about deliberative democracy, I think somebody before, but decision making. For example, Aboriginal people are not Democrats. They're not. They were given a chance of having a system called ATSEC, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, and it was put up by Canberra. Whitefellas, not only whitefellas, some Aboriginal people too, thought we should learn the benefits of democracy. Well, we only had one go at it, and that was it. We saw through it straight away. And of course, the government at the time, I think he swept democracy, or he swept it away just straight out. So later on, a few years later, a group of Aboriginal people decided to try and have a go at setting up our own system. So they attended to all of the Aboriginal systems, you see, the values. So gender balanced, not hierarchy, and various other things, but one of them included not having democracy. Because before they actually set it up, they had research done, forums, questionnaires, all sorts of things around the country, as many people as they could. And they asked people, do you want us? What kind of system do you want? So they laid out several systems. And one of them was to have ADJUNCT again, or some other form of ADJUNCT. And something like 80%, 70 to 80% of people, Aboriginal people, said, no, we don't want anything to do with democracy. Because we could see the lie of it, that you are expected, what is asked of you is that you have faith in what that person is asking you to vote for him or her about. Trust me, I will look after your interests. It's a gamble. Like one Aboriginal person said, the whole system is a gamble. You're expected to believe that. And of course, what happens is that it doesn't happen like that, because the nature of democracy is that what somebody once described is it's a bit like a bus. The front of it is very attractive, and it draws you in. But the middle part, or the end part, where did all these homeless, thousands or millions of homeless people come from in a great democracy? Do you know what I mean? How did that happen? How is it that 1 million people died in the greatest democracy? 1 million people die because they don't have any health system over there. At least, the idea of, and this is a good thing, the national health system, from our point of view, that would be seen as the law of obligation in practice. That's why it's a wonderful thing. And yet, as we speak, from what you read in The Guardian, various papers, certain vested interests, including that government, I think, are trying to do away with the National Health Service. They actually want a system like America. That is totally against the law of obligation. So you have to have as many institutions and ways of being that is to do with obligation, looking after everybody. That's wonderful. And National Health Service, no matter whether you were poor as a church mouse, you had nothing at all. It was free, this very good quality healthcare for everybody. So no one's left behind. And that's the other thing of Aboriginal systems. You don't leave people behind. And that's what democracy was seen as. Yes. And not only that, dodgy people could come into being, be voted in. Dodgy people, or apparently good people who change their minds after, and betray everything they were voted for. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So that's only a few of them. There's a lot of other things. Yeah, sorry, not enough time.
Thank you, Mary. And we have a few further comments and questions, but I am afraid we're starting to run out of time. We scheduled until 1:30. We did have that delay,
Yes.
which again, we're
sorry about that.
But that's okay. Look, what I want to do is, before we say goodbye to Mary, I actually want to just quickly plug, if you would like more of Mary. Mary speaks in a lot of places. She's also got a lot of articles that she's written. We're about to make sure that we've got a full list of her materials on the Future Dreaming website. I know she has info too on Black Card. But what I wanted to draw your attention to, ladies and gentlefolk, futuredreaming.org.au is the wonderful not-for-profit organisation that Mary and Ross Williams, the Bindal Juraman, myself and James Lee are starting to build proper way. And if you look at events, Mary, Ross and myself will be doing a workshop on, I'm just looking for the date because I don't remember it myself. If you're interested, please sign up. The next one is the 16th of July. It's a paid workshop. That income goes directly to Mary and Ross and their Indigenous oriented projects. There's also another one in September. Mary will be speaking at a whole range of other activities and events. And do please keep an eye, sign up to the Future Dreaming websites mailing list, and Ayla. Ayla shares everything for future dreaming. Because we're deeply connected, we promote that work. And we will keep you posted on this lovely, beautiful book that we're trying to claw time for. And it really will host a lot of Mary's wonderful ideas, connected with a non-Indigenous person who's madly keen on Mary's work and governance. And it explores lots of different ways that we can change our society gently and beautifully to be a better place. But that's our plug for future dreaming. Do sign up to one of our workshops if you want, or if you've got groups that you'd like us to speak to, particularly just Mary or Mary Ross, myself and others, just get in touch. We've been teaching into a few different projects and courses, and super keen to get these wonderful words of wisdom out.
And
yes.
Could I just say, if people could switch into the new economy in Nina
thank you for plugging Nina. Yes,
because that's something that I don't know. I haven't got much to say about it, but a new economy, you know, an economy is going to be around forever. So how do you have a better one, a fairer one, a more civilized one? And I know there are brilliant people around the world, writers, white fellas, who've tried to write books, written books about how to civilize capitalism, you know, or humanize it, how to humanize capitalism or something like that. Various things, you know, and really good thoughts, good thinking and so on. So check out that.
Nina, absolutely.
Nina. Yeah.
We re-rope Mary and Anne Paulina and Tyson Yonka Porter into Nina events wherever we can. So yeah, good one, Mary. All right. So look, thank you so much, everyone. Lots of lovely comments and questions. Everyone's very grateful to you, Mary. Lovely comments there.
Thanks.
We will send you a link for the recording through emails if anyone wants to rewatch this or share it with others. Some projects we do are paid, others where we really appreciate your donations. They go to support everyone's work. So Mary, as always, so wonderful to spend time with you. And I do apologize again for whatever technical.
No, I'm sorry about that.
No, yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone.
See you then. Bye.